Talia, thank you so much for being on the show and just sharing your wisdom, particularly around competitive intelligence. And I know we're going to dive into why battle cards suck from your perspective. But before we dive in, can you just give folks kind of a quick background on yourself and how you really dove into becoming one of the top experts in this topic?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for calling me an expert and saying that I have wisdom to share. I look at it as experience, and if it's helpful and useful to anyone, that makes me really happy. But I appreciate the intro and being here. So a little bit about myself. I got into product marketing around 7, 8-ish years ago. I did that both at pretty established pre-IPO companies and then later as a founding PMM on much smaller like growth stage um, companies as well.
Mhm.
For the last year, almost year, I've been doing it as a consultant, and I work with SaaS B2B companies around the same stages as well, because there's for sure some challenges that I see repeating themselves at many, like at that specific point. Before that, I was in product. Before that, I worked as a PMO at a company that's probably the opposite of a small pre-IPO company. Was working at like really big companies. And I think the one thing that all these roles have in common is that they're also very cross-functional. And I think it's that and the different sizes of companies that I was lucky to work in, both being two factors that's been just like really useful throughout my career and especially in product marketing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Speaking of B2B SaaS companies, what would you say? And I know this is a big question, but I know we've talked a little bit about kind of your perspective on the topic, particularly around building effective competitive intelligence programs. If you had to summarize, what are some of those kind of must-haves in your perspective?
Yeah, and I love that question. I think it's actually a very deep question. So the thing with competitive intel is that I think it's a lot of times at many different types of companies, it's seen kind of like a closed off area of its own, like it's almost like a small function that's supposed to enable the entire organization. And I think the key here is to really understand that competitive intel it should be part of a wider market research or market intelligence function. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a team or a person that's like their entire job, but just in terms of, like what they do and the value that they bring. I think, competitive intel, for it to be effective, it needs to enable an entire organization. So not just one team. Sometimes it's I think again, like it's perceived as something that we do for sales, but no, like it's not just for sales, it's for marketing, it's for product, it's for sales, it's for success, like it's for the entire organization, it's for pricing, it's for the entire organization. um, and it's not just about like this one specific team that's like super tactical. And then again, I think for competitive intel to be effective, it also needs to bring topics for discussions, right? Like it needs to start conversations. Not again, like not necessarily just to bring like the tactical, like here's a battle card or like here's a competitive landing page, but really to be more part of, and it kind of ties back to the market intelligence. It's just about connecting the dots, right? So, and I think when we're able to do that in a way that helps the entire organization kind of know what they should take away from that and how they should bring it to their own functions. So to me, that's a really effective competitive intel, you know, program at a company.
Awesome. Well, if you were to think about the topic of battle cards, and I know this is something that you feel pretty strongly about, Why do battle cards suck?
Yeah. So I think for years I never even dared to tell that to anyone, but I really do. I don't want to use the H word, so I'm going to say I really dislike them. Um, and I think for two main reasons. So I think the format doesn't help the function. I think it's kind of missing the forest for the trees. It's very detailed. It's like here's everything we know about this specific company, but it's sometimes like it's way TMI, especially for sales. And it's kind of like missing the bigger point often. That's what I find. I feel like whenever I would look at battle cards that existed at companies that I worked out that were already, I just like I looked at them and I was like, okay, great. Like what now? And that's the second part of why I don't like them. I think they're not actionable.
Mhm.
Like it's a great summary of stuff, but I don't know. Like, do we expect everyone in sales to like memorize it? Do we expect them to like open it up and like read that from their screen like in a meeting? Like we obviously like don't want that, right? Like, and I've also never seen a growth marketer, for example, like looking at a little card and kind of like scratches like their head and be like, oh yeah, I totally get what I'm supposed to do with this information. Like, oh, I have a great idea. So I think it's just not. It again, like it just goes back to it not being actionable. Like it's a lot of information, um, but no one really understands what they're supposed to do with it.
So is it the format that we typically write these in? And I know there's been a couple tools out there that have popped up over the last couple years. I know Guru was more of a intranet type system, right? But you could certainly use it for, battle cards and other types of actionable sort of sales enablement assets. So is it like the way that we just been writing them too much? It's a kind of the kitchen sink. It's hard for sales reps to digest and internalize. Is it that, or is it just something else?
So I don't think it's the tool because as you said, like you have intranets or like knowledge bases. There's so many. You can do it in Notion. You can do it in Guru. You can do it in like there's so many other places and like microsites or something like that, like spaces for the information to live. And I think it's definitely a part of it, right? Like how do you make it accessible? That's for sure important, but I think it's almost like a later problem that you need to solve for. Like, you know, before you were thinking about how are people going to find it, I think we really need to hone in on the format and what's the goal and the point of it to begin with, and how do we make sure um, we create um, that asset or that tool for all these other teams to go and being able to to take that and extrapolate that and use it in their own jobs without you needing to constantly tell them what to do with it, because that's not the point.
One thing that also comes to mind is the empowerment of the sales managers, right? Because I think as product marketers, you can put some great stuff together and hand it over, but if they're not helping the end user, in this case the sales rep, actually turn that into something that's actionable and fits into their sales talks and their sales motions and you know all the sort of tasks that they have to execute on a daily basis, then it's just thrown away or it's poorly executed and these sort of things. And that's been my experience both as an IC or an independent sort of individual within the organization, but also from a perspective of a sales manager. If you're not actually doing your job as a sales manager, marketing, product marketing, these stakeholders really, their work is sort of in vain or not being
Mhm.
able to surface to the top and show the value. Any tips around that?
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting point because as you said, like you just like said a whole but like that was one piece of something that they have to worry about, like out of like 100 other things, right? And I think the expectation maybe that they see that competitive analysis and can figure out and translate how they can turn that into something that they can use to enable their team. I think it's a really big ask. I think it's a really, really big ask. And maybe we need, like, all of us need to do a better job of, collaborating like a little more closely and talking to each other and trying to hone in on the format and the type of information that's actually going to make it, easier for them to do. And once we nail that, then we can then we can really think about enablement and how do we want to surface it and how often do we want to train people and things like that. But I think just the expectation of let's have these like 18 keycast cards, and expect all of sales to memorize them, like I just think it's not a realistic expectation. Like I wish it worked like that, but I think like that's part of why I really dislike the format, because that's not realistic.
Yeah, that really resonates from a couple different aspects. But I think what I'm hearing here is alignment,
Mhm.
right? Collaboration, this human stuff that we tend to, for whatever reason, no matter how many tools we still have, are still not able to kind of nail here. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit, this concept of product marketing and, let's say, sales leadership alignment, because ultimately the beneficiary of this is the sales rep, right? How
Right.
can we do that better, particularly around developing competitive assets?
So I think the first thing that we need to understand here is, where is the struggle internally in the sales team? Like, do we see that more with SDRs or AEs or both, or is it like in a different segment of the market? Is it the enterprise deals that are kind of that they're like having a rough time, or is it the opposite? Is it a specific use case? So, I mean, the first step in alignment is have the conversations, right? Like if you're a product marketer and you're not talking to sales leadership on a regular basis, like you're doing your job wrong. And I know sometimes like it's not you may not think that you have like an ideal partner on the other side. Um, Maybe they don't get product marketing or whatever, but I think we have to solve for that first. Like we have to figure out ways to work with the people that exist there, and to really work towards that alignment. And then I think, having these conversations also with people from the sales team. So sales engineers are a great resource. Like one of honestly my favorite resource as a product marketer when I was in-house, sales engineers all day, every day. But make sure you talk to them. Make sure you talk to at least a few AEs or a few SDRs on a regular basis, and just hear, like problems on the ground, right? Like what they're facing, where they're really struggling to find the challenge. And for my experience, at least, I remember when I did that, it just kind of hit me that it's not the feature comparison table that is necessary sometimes, like, right, like again, like for CI it tends to be a very detailed oriented um, role or like function or type of people who do that. But I think that at any honestly any cross-functional role that you're gonna work in, um, the skill of translating all the details and the things that you find and that you see in a way that makes sense for your stakeholders, that part is key. That part is absolutely key, and I don't think you can do that part effectively unless you're having these conversations with them constantly. And then, of course, you can always ask for feedback, right? So instead of working on this big project, on the side for like 2 solid months, not showing to anyone, and then kind of be like, I'm done, and have this like big presentation or training session, and just to see everyone kind of like scratching their heads. No, like pull a few people in and have them be part of the process, right? Like have them give you feedback, Like do one or two pieces, send it to them to share their thoughts. Like try to see if this is hitting, if this makes sense, it resonates. And if it does, great, then you can go ahead and continue. And if not, then go back and kind of figure something else out. Because at the end of the day, if you're building the best research program ever, if no one's gonna look at it, then it's really like all in vain.
And how do you get sales managers to buy in to you taking time from their sales reps, right? Because some sales managers are a little more
Protective.
just, yeah, protective, right? And those sort of things. Any tips around that?
Yeah. Yeah, let's use that word, protective, for sure. So I think for that, if you haven't established that relationship with them to prove your value first, then yeah, maybe don't jump right into that, but maybe spend some time doing that. Adjacent topic, but a way that again like worked for me really well in previous companies, um, to prove that value really quickly, was to like run even like a win-loss analysis. And it doesn't have to be crazy, and you don't have to chase like 20 customer interviews that are so hard to find. You can do it for sure with the resources that you have, even if they're not perfect. But I think that any attempt that you show, um, that shows that you're trying to make their jobs easier, which is truly the sole purpose of a product marketer, I think. I think that will get you a lot of brownie points and lots of credit with that team. And then, obviously, maybe don't spend like, 5 hours a month with each member of the team, but at least identify a couple of people who are going to have really key feedback. And I have not met the sales leader who saw the value of product marketing and said no to that.
Got it. I just thought about what you just said there, because the value of product marketing sometimes, I don't want to make a huge statement about it, just given that I haven't worn the actual hat and I've just been in the space now for a couple years, really being a student of the practice. But the value of product marketing is often buried for a variety of reasons. Maybe as we wrap up the episode today, we can dive into number one, maybe some tips around being able to highlight the value as it relates to all the competitive work that we're doing. And then lastly, adoption of these assets, right? Because that's going to surface the value as well, particularly if they are using it properly and understand beforehand, right, that this is going to drive value.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, we can start even with the adoption. I think it's such an important topic. And I think there are so many ways to create those like, adoption or enablement programs. And it might look differently in each organization, kind of depends on the team, the cultures, the managers there. But and yeah, no, I can share a couple of things that worked for me in the past. So we already talked about the first one, have them be part of the process. That's always a good idea, when that's available to you, right? Like when you do have that collaboration, because when you have when you're about to launch a new asset or a new, initiative, and you can say, hey, that AE who's like the best AE, who's winning the most, he was part of this process. It just gives you instant credibility, and other people are going to pay closer attention, right?
I
It
love
just
that.
makes it look a little more, um, you know, in their world and not like disconnected. So I think that's the one. If they can be part of the process in the building process, at least provide feedback, which we also touched on. Another one that I love is sharing successes, right?
Mm.
So if you do find that early adopter, that top AE, um, and you have seen them, or like you saw a call recording of them using your new messaging or news, or using talking points that you came up with in your sales playbook, um, give them a shout out, like make sure that everyone knows how like how well it worked for them, how beautifully the quick dismiss that they use like really steer the conversation in a different way with a prospect. Shout them out, share the call recording, like that snippet, make sure that they're celebrated. So again, just like bring more eyeballs into those wins, and share them. And then we talked about this too, enablement. And this is something that you have to do with partnership with the sales team. If you don't have that relationship, like we'll work on that first. This is a must. And there's many ways to do that, right? Like don't wait until SKO to present anything. Ask to, like, if you have something new or if you have something that you want to share and just get feedback in a group setting, ask them to be like a guest, you know, in their team meeting every once in a while. Um, Another thing that we did that was really successful, the one thing that salespeople are, they're really competitive. So maybe, organize a little competition about competition, which we did that like with a survey. We did that live. It was kind of like a happy hour, like we asked them questions online, and we could see like in real time who got it right and who didn't, and it was like a lot of fun, super like engaging activity, rather than just hearing like a super long slide deck,
Yeah.
and maybe pause for questions every once in a while. A lot of people do internal newsletters too, just to share, again, like wins or new assets or new things. It doesn't have to be crazy. I've done the really scrappy version of that, and that was in Slack, and that actually worked beautifully. We would just have a Slack channel that was just for this one purpose, so it wasn't lost. And every week we would post a few things there. And if people had follow up questions, they would just reply in a thread. So everything was there, nothing got lost, and our sales team loved it. So there's just so many ways you can be really creative with that enablement. And yeah, my advice would also be like, don't just try one channel. Like try different things, like Slack, emails, presentations, activities, competitions. Like try different things. People learn things in different ways.
Yeah.
So repetition, that's fine. Just keep it interesting, and make sure that they see the value.
Yeah, one thing there that you said that really resonates is people learn in different ways. So don't assume that one set of sales folks are going to learn in the same way as others, right? So really being able to think about them as customers, right? Like
Yeah,
end
oh, for
users,
sure.
right?
For sure. And even like use video, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not just written. Some people need, to hear something, from a person. So you can record yourself even going through something that you did, that kind of walks them through how to, like, why it matters. Here's how you use it. And then that video can live, in that internal wiki or knowledge base, for everyone to reference, along with the asset itself,
Yeah.
which is also really useful. And I think it's exactly as you said. It's like just like when you're using today in all of your marketing efforts, you're using videos and long form and short form. Like it's kind of similar. Like we are marketers. We can we can figure out how to get people. Hopefully, we can figure out how to get people use our work internally as well.
Awesome. Well, if folks wanted to learn more about your work or get in contact, what are the best channels to reach you?
Yeah. So I mostly, probably the best way to reach me would be on LinkedIn. Either connect, DM. My website is also there where I have some more resources if folks want to learn more. But that would be mostly the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Talya Heller, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. Sharing your energy, sharing your vision and expertise. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.